Let's start the homework questions on section 2.5. And for question number 1, I need to complete the factoring. So for question 1a, I'm given this trinomial 6x squared plus 11x plus 4, and we're given one of the factored forms, which is 2x plus 1. So what we need to do is we need to complete this missing blank right there. Okay, so if we use the FOIL technique, I know that 2 times this has to give me a 6x squared. So 2x times what will give me a 6x squared? Well, that's going to be a 3x, right? So 2x times 3x is going to be 6x squared. And what I like to do is I kind of skip to the last part here. So my last term here is a 4, and my inner term here is a 1. So 1 times what will give me a 4? So this has to be a positive 4, right? So 1 times 4 gives me the 4 there. All right, so my answer is 3x plus 4. Okay, moving on to letter B. My trinomial is this, and I'm given one of the factored forms right there. All right, so let's focus on the 8x squared. So I know that using the FOIL technique, 4x times what will give me the 8x squared? Well, that's going to be a 2x. Okay, and then focus on this last term, which is a 9. 3 times what will give you a 9? Well, that's going to be a plus 3, right? So 3 times 3 gives you the 9, which is that guy right there. So that's probably the fastest way to kind of finish off question number 1. You're basically, if you're using the FOIL technique, you're pretty much focusing on the first term and the last term to kind of finish off these problems. Okay, so knowing that, let's go ahead and do letter C now. Here's my first term. Okay, here's a 2x. So 2x times what will give me 2x squared? Well, that has to be a single x, right? And then I have a 15, right? So 5 times what will give me a 15? So I need a plus 3 there, right? So 5 times 3 gives me 15, which is that last term there. So that's going to be x plus 3. All right, moving on to letter D now. My leading coefficient there is an 8, so I have a 4x there. So 4x times what will give me an 8x squared? Well, that's going to be a 2x. And then my last term here is a negative 1, right? So negative 1 times what will give me a positive 3, right? So this has to be a negative 3. So negative 1 times negative 3 is going to be positive 3. Okay, let's move on to letter E now. Okay, so I got a 12x, and there's a 2x, and a blank there. So 2x times what will give me a 12x squared? Well, that's going to be a 6x. And then my last term here is a 3. So negative 3 times what will give me positive 3? Well, that's going to be a negative 1. So 6x minus 1 goes in the blank. Okay, moving on to letter F. I have a 9x squared. I have a 3x. So 3x times what will give me 9x squared? Well, that's going to be a 3x. And then my last term is a 1. So negative 1 times what will give me a positive 1? Well, that's going to be a negative 1, right? So a negative times a negative gives you the positive 1. So 3x minus 1 goes in the bracket. All right, for letter G, I have a 9x squared and I have a 3x. So 3x times what will give me a 9x squared? That's going to be a 3x. And here's a negative 2. So negative 1 times what will give me a negative 2? That's going to be a positive 2. Actually, okay, let's move on to letter H here. Let me highlight the first term here, 2x squared, and I have an x there. So x times what will give me a 2x squared? Well, that's going to be a 2x. And my last term here is a negative 15. So negative 3 times what will give me a negative 15? That's going to be positive 5. Okay, let's move on to I. There's an 18x squared and a 2x. So 2x times what will give me an 18x squared? That's going to be a 9x. And my last term here is a negative 6. So positive 3 times what will give me a negative 6? That's going to be a negative 2. Okay, and let's move on to letter J now. Here's a 15x squared and a 5x. So 5x times what will give me a 15x squared? That's going to be a 3x. My last term here is a 15, so 3 times what will give me negative 15? That's going to be negative 5. All right, so that's it for question number 1. And for the rest of this homework video guide, I will work on the problems on question number 2, factoring trinomials when you have a leading coefficient that's greater than 1. When you look at the numbers here, I have a 2, 13, and a 15. I can't factor out any more numbers, so this is a special type of trinomial factoring, and I'm going to go over a brand new technique to factor these ones because you can't pull out any common factors. The key indicator for this kind of factoring is that you have 3 terms, you have a leading coefficient greater than 1, and there's no GCF. So the factoring questions on 2.5 focus on this kind of trinomial. All right, so a brand new technique here. So when I do a problem like this, I generally kind of highlight the leading coefficient, which is 2, and I need to find 2 numbers that multiply to 2. So I'm thinking of numbers that multiply to 2, and the one that comes up to my mind is 1 and 2. Okay, and then I look at my 15, and I need to find 2 numbers that multiply to 15. So I'm thinking about 5 and 3, right? 5 times 3 is 15. Okay, so now I kind of use this little smiley face technique where I take my first number, which is 1, and I multiply it with this last number, which is 3. So 1 times 3 is 3. And then I multiply these inside numbers, 2 times 5, which is 10. Now, this is how you know if you got the numbers correct or not. What's 10 plus 3? If you get the middle number 13, then you know if you picked the numbers correctly. And now you can go ahead and set up your 2 brackets. All right, so just like FOIL, remember this times this has to give you a 2x squared, right? So basically I need to use these numbers here, the 1 and the 2, right? So if I transfer the 1 and 2 over, I have a 1x and a 2x, right? So 1x times 2x gives me basically 2x squared, which matches that. Okay, and then continue on with this foiling technique here. Remember, if you look at the 1 here, the 1 multiplies with the 3, right? The 1 multiplies with the 3. So the 1 multiplies with the 3, so I need a plus 3 over here. And then you'll notice that this 2, that multiplies with the 5, right? So that means I need the plus 5 over here, right? So that's how you kind of transfer the numbers into the brackets. So my final answer is 1x plus 5 times 2x plus 3. And some teachers call this the smiley face method, and this is one of the techniques that you can use to kind of factor these trinomials. Okay, let's move on to letter B now. All right, so for letter B, recognize that this is a trinomial, and you have a leading coefficient greater than 1, and there's no common factor. All right, so this kind of trinomial requires a different factoring technique, and the factoring technique that I'll be using throughout this video is the smiley face method. All right, so for the smiley face method, let's take a look at the first term and the last term, the numbers, the coefficients. So 2 numbers that multiply to 3 are 1 and 3, and then I need 2 numbers that multiply to 4. I'm thinking 2 and 2. All right, so let's go ahead and execute the smiley face technique. So 1 times 2 is 2. And 3 times 2 is 6. And if you go ahead and add 6 plus 2, if you get this middle number, then you've got the right numbers. And after that, you can go ahead and jump to your brackets. Okay, so remember that the first 2 terms, this times this, has to give you 3x squared, right? So the numbers are right here, 1 and 3. So 1x and 3x. All right, and then if you follow the smiley face, this 1 in purple multiplies with this 2. So I need a plus 2 there. And then you'll notice that this 3 multiplies with this 2, right? So I need a 2 here. And there you go. That's how you can kind of factor that trinomial there. So 1x plus 2 times 3x plus 2. Now throughout this video, I will usually put a 1 here, but you can just kind of write this as x plus 2 times 3x plus 2. All right, but throughout my video, I'll definitely kind of put the 1 there so that it kind of matches up with that 1. All right, let's move on to letter C now. For letter C, let's kind of erase all this. Okay, so my leading coefficient is 10, and my last term here is a 3. So now I need 2 numbers that multiply to 10. I'm thinking of 2 and 5, and I also need 2 numbers that multiply to 3. So I'm thinking about 3 and 1. All right, so let's go ahead and execute the smiley face technique. 2 times 1 is 2, and 5 times 3 is 15. And you'll notice that if I add 15 and 2, I do get 17, so my numbers are correct. And now I can go ahead and set my 2 brackets and execute the smiley face technique. Usually these two numbers, 2 and 5, they kind of go to the front, 2x and 5x. And then notice that the 2 kind of multiplies with the 1, right? So 2 multiplies with the 1, so I need a plus 1 there, and then the 3 goes on the inside. So my final answer is 2x plus 3 times 5x plus 1. Okay, let's move on to letter D now. So let's go ahead and highlight the leading coefficient, which is 8, and the constant term there, which is 9. I need 2 numbers that multiply to 8, so I'm thinking 2 and 4, and 2 numbers that multiply to 9. Now, remember, there's a minus 18 there, so if your last term is positive and the middle term is negative, then both numbers have to be negative when you're multiplying to the last term. So 2 numbers that multiply to positive 9, both numbers have to be negative here to work. Okay, so if I execute the smiley face technique, 2 times negative 3 is negative 6, and 4 times negative 3 is negative 12, and for sure negative 12 minus 6 gives me negative 18. So now I can jump to my 2 brackets. All right, and usually these first 2 terms, or these first 2 numbers, which I'm circling in green, they usually go to the front, 2x and 4x. And if I follow out the 2, this 2 multiplies with this negative 3, so negative 3 and negative 3. So there's your final answer for that one. Okay, let's move on to letter E now. I might erase this to get a little bit more space here. Okay, let's go ahead and highlight the leading coefficient, which is 21, and the constant term, which is 10. All right, 2 numbers that multiply to 21. I'm thinking of 3 and 7. And 2 numbers that multiply to 10, I'm thinking about, well, also consider that the middle number is negative, so both numbers have to be negative over here, so I'm thinking negative 5 and negative 2. Okay, let's go ahead and use the smiley face technique. 3 times 2 is negative 6, and 7 times negative 5 is negative 35. And negative 35 minus 6 is indeed negative 41, so that combination works. And let's go ahead and set up my brackets here. Using my purple marker, the 3 and the 7, usually those are your first terms. So 3x and 7x. And just follow the 3. The 3 multiplies with the negative 2. So 3 has to multiply with negative 2. And then 7 has to multiply with negative 5. So negative 5 goes on the inside there. So 3x minus 5 and 7x minus 2. All right, letter F. Let's go ahead and circle the leading coefficient and the constant term. 2 numbers that multiply to 2 are 1 and 2. And if you haven't noticed throughout my video, usually when I find the 2 numbers that multiply to the leading coefficient, I usually have the smaller number first and the bigger number as the second number. So that's one of the kind of ways. That's one of the ways that I use to kind of organize the numbers here. And then for my 5, since the middle term is negative, the last 2 numbers have to be negative as well. So 2 numbers that multiply negative 5, I'm thinking negative 1 and negative 5. All right, let's go ahead and use the smiley face technique. 1 times negative 5 is negative 5, and 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. And for sure, if I look at this negative 2 and that negative 5, that gives me negative 7. So I have the right setup, and now we've got to complete the brackets here. Using my green marker, I have a 1 and a 2, so 1x and 2x. The 1 multiplies with the negative 5, so this is going to be negative 5, and this is going to be negative 1. I do apologize, it shouldn't be x, it should be y in this case, so a y and a y there. So 1y minus 1 and 2y minus 5. Okay, let's keep on going here. I have a few more to go, and then I'm done this first video guide. Okay, so let's circle the leading coefficient, which is 20, and the constant term, which is negative 8. All right, so I need 2 numbers that multiply to 20. I'm thinking 4 and 5, and 2 numbers that multiply to negative 8. And since the middle number is negative, one number will be positive and one number will be negative. So I'm thinking of 1 and negative 8. All right, let's go ahead and use the smiley face technique. 4 times negative 8 is negative 32. and 5 times 1 is 5. And for sure, negative 32 plus 5 is negative 27. So let's go ahead and jump to the brackets. Using my green marker here, I have a 4 and a 5, so 4x and a 5x. And the 4 multiplies with the negative 8, so 4 multiplies with the negative 8, and then the plus 1 will go on the inside. So 4x plus 1 and 5x minus 8. Okay, let's move on to letter H. There's a 3 and a negative 63, so two numbers that multiply to 3, I'm thinking 1 and 3, and two numbers that multiply to negative 63. But the middle number is negative, so that means one number will be positive and one number will be negative, so I'm thinking of negative 9 and 7. So 1 times 7 is 7, and 3 times 9 is negative 27. And for sure, if I look at the numbers here, negative 27 plus 7 is negative 20, so that combination works. So let's go ahead and set my two brackets. And using my green marker here, I have a 1 and a 3, so 1x and a 3x. And the 1 multiplies with the 7, so I need a plus 7 there and a negative 9 there. So, and sorry, I keep on making this mistake here where the variable is not x, it's actually z in this case. So z and 3z. Okay, so 1z minus 9 and 3z plus 7. Okay, let's do the last two here. I have a 8 and a negative 9, so two numbers that multiply to 8. I'm thinking of 1 and 8, two numbers that multiply to negative 9. And since this is a positive sign here, one's going to be positive and one's going to be negative. So I'm thinking of negative 1 and 9. Let's see if the rainbow technique works here, or the smiley face technique works here. I have a plus 9 there, and negative 8 there, and negative 8. So 9 minus 8 does give you a positive 1, so that combination definitely works. And just using my green marker here, I have a 1 and an 8, so 1x and 8x. The 1 multiplies with the 9, so that's going to be a plus 9, and that's going to be a negative 1. And once again, these are z's, sorry. So 1z minus 1 and 8z plus 9 as my final answer for that one. Okay, let's move on to letter J here. Last one for this particular video. Okay, I have a 15 and I have a negative 15. So two numbers that multiply to 15, I'm thinking 3 and 5, and two numbers that multiply to negative 15. Now I have a minus sign in the middle, so one number will be negative and one number will be positive. So I'm thinking negative 5 and 3. Using the rainbow technique here, I've got a 9 there, and I have a negative 25. And if you go ahead and add negative 25 minus 9, I definitely get the negative 16. So that works, right? So let's go ahead and set the two brackets. So I have a 3 and a 5, so that's going to be 3x plus, sorry, it's going to be 3x and a 5x. And then, you know, just follow that order pretty much. It's going to be negative 5 and plus 3. Okay, so that concludes this homework video guide for the first part for the questions on section 2.5, and part 2 of the homework guide will be coming up next.